Hello and welcome to a video of me, a very British person, struggling, as you can see, to identify where all the states in the United States of America are. There were a few that I knew already, but it was a small handful out of the total 50. The ones that I knew before starting this was Washington, which I've just placed. That I know, I guess, because it has the same name as the capital, Washington, D.C., I think, and it's also in the top left-hand corner. So it's kind of a very easily identifiable state. Then similarly, Maine in the top right, I also knew that one. I'm not 100% certain why, but possibly just again because it's top right and it's just easy to see and an easy place to start if you're looking at states. Then same, Florida, bottom right. Quite an identifiable state in terms of its shape, is one of the ones I could identify just if someone placed a picture of it. I would be able to say, oh, that's Florida, because it's a classic shape. But then also, obviously, again, bottom right hand corner, easy to remember. And if we're following the same logic, California is also one that I know. Bottom left corner, and again, a very famous state and probably identifiable to most people just from the image. Again, other ones that I knew were Texas, a very identifiable state, and also right at the bottom as well. Possibly Florida is lower, I'm not 100% certain, but an easy to remember state, one that I do know. And then Alaska and Hawaii, especially on this map, because obviously they're fairly separate. 201 attempts, which is so embarrassing. But for a first attempt, not too bad. I didn't realise skipping meant the states wouldn't come back again. I thought I would be able to go back again and have fewer states to have to pick through, but sadly not. So here we are, trying again, struggling again. It's incredibly difficult when you've only ever heard of these places. And the thing that you can use typically is some basic knowledge. So you know some of them are closer to Canada, for instance. You know that they're colder, or you know that the accents are strange, shall we say, the kind of Fargo-esque accent. You're thinking, okay, they're further north. Similarly, you know some are further south. You know that they're either the kind of famous southern states or they're just a hotter state, which then I think can also be kind of in the middle. And that's where I really got lost, was in that middle bit. Was really confusing. The way I did remember Missouri was as if it was like a misery, like a sad thing, and it's right in the middle of America. Admittedly, it technically isn't in the middle of the bad bit, as in the confusing bit. It's in the middle of America-ish. I suppose actually Kansas is right in the middle, but that's how I remembered Missouri. And then it was misery, and it's in the middle. That was the easiest way for me to remember it. In terms of Kansas, next to Missouri, I just remembered it by being diagonal to Arkansas, or Arkansas, as I think it's actually meant to be said, but obviously it's just spelled Arkansas. So that's how I remembered it. I just remembered Kansas is on the upper left, Arkansas or Arkansas is on the bottom right. I don't know how I remember where they are specifically. Attempt number 3 is hopefully meant to be a lot better. Minnesota was a struggle. Finding Minnesota and then below it Wisconsin was very difficult. Minnesota and Wisconsin, I knew them, or at least I thought I knew them, as colder states, and also ones that are again close to Canada, but I really struggled knowing which one was Minnesota and which one was the one slightly below it, which is Wisconsin. Now how I just try to remember it is Minnesota is alphabetically before Wisconsin. So that's how I put them together, essentially. A lot of the ones that I remember based on connecting patterns. So you'll see a lot of them I pair up or I put into little groups. Michigan, actually next to Wisconsin, I did kind of already know. I knew the area. I knew Michigan and Illinois. Again, I'm pairing them up somewhat just because of I watched Star Kids. So shout out to any of Harry Potter musical fans. And they went to Michigan University or college. I don't know what it's called, but they went to Michigan. So I did vaguely know where Michigan was. At least I certainly knew it was one of the northern ones. And then Illinois, I'm not 100% certain why I know where Illinois is. I think it's because of Chicago. It's just a very famous state or a very famous city in Illinois, if it is in Illinois. So that's how I knew where Illinois was, or that's how I worked it out. And for some reason in my head, Illinois and Michigan are really, really close to each other. I don't know why I know that. That, not piece of knowledge, is a strange one. But that's how I got those two. The one, then using Illinois, I got Iowa and Indiana because it's the three I's next to each other. And this isn't going to make a lot of sense to most people. But you can see I'm like hovering over everything, trying to like create ways. So there I'm just saying Connecticut connects those two states. But 161, so 10 better, not too bad. But I got Iowa because Iowa is shaped slightly more like an O, because it's a square, which is slightly more round than a rectangle in my head. Then Illinois is next to Iowa, and again it's long, which is more like an L. So we have IO, which is the square, IL, which is the long rectangle, and then we have Indiana, which is the shorter rectangle, more like an N. So that's how I remembered those three, and it doesn't make any sense, but it's the best I could do. And then obviously next to Indiana is Ohio, and I say obviously when it was not obvious in any way, shape or form, because I would have sworn Ohio was not there whenever I've seen anything to do with Ohio. But I think that again, it's much more like an O than even Iowa, and it begins with an O, so that makes sense. So we have the kind of four vowels next to each other, 3 I's, and I create the shape of their state based on the second letter of their state name, and then Ohio. Look, 85 attempts. That's pretty good. Like I'm blasting through it with all these amazing tricks that I'm teaching you. Then in terms of Wisconsin, we've already discussed. There's North Dakota, South Dakota, West Virginia, and then North Carolina, South Carolina. As I've kind of already said, for some reason pairs work really well in my mind, so I could always remember them, especially obviously North and South, because the Dakotas look kind of similar. You know, they actually do align, which is quite rare for most states. They're very weirdly shaped. West Virginia and Virginia, I guess, are very weirdly shaped, but one is definitely west. North Carolina and South Carolina are the most different and confusing, I would say. But I guess because they're directly below Virginia, it was fine and it made sense. So that's how I remembered all of those. In terms of Maine, I already knew. New Hampshire, I got Vermont was like a V, like a small V. So I just said, okay, New Hampshire is like an N, basically. That's how I got that. Then below New Hampshire with Massachusetts, I just looked at it as like a little point that sticks out quite far. And I'm not quite so sure where the founding fathers, I don't know who it is, the Pilgrims, I don't know who, I'm so sorry, I don't know who founded America. When those people came across, for some reason in my head, they landed in maybe Massachusetts. They landed in around that area, so that's why I was thinking of Massachusetts. Then below Massachusetts, we have a teeny tiny little blob, which that's how I remembered it was Rhode Island, because, you know, islands are small. So I was like, okay, it's small, it's an island. Then we have next to Rhode Island, Connecticut, which I was just thinking of as like a connecting thing between an island, like Rhode Island, and then New York, which is next to it. New York is a really odd shape and not the shape I would have expected from New York. I don't know why I expected from New York, but I just didn't expect it to look like that. So that's why I remembered it, was because it was so strange looking to me. Now, I'm really sorry to New Jersey. I remember New Jersey as the butt of New York, and I think someone had said that once. That's how I remembered it, because it's tacked on the end of New York. So I apologise. It's just how I remember it. Again, I profusely apologise to anyone from New Jersey. Below, Delaware. I remember it as Delaware? Where is Delaware? And it's this tiny little thing, which is just strange. And I also think Delaware is definitely a state. Again, I apologise to anyone from Delaware. There are a lot of people will forget. Maryland just was odd, was just an odd state. 54, not bad. Maryland was just an odd state, so that's how I remembered it. It looks odd. That's the best I could do. And I just knew it was in the kind of northwest-ish area, I guess very west actually, central west, so, or east. Then Pennsylvania, I remembered it just as being near New York because Monica says she's Pennsylvanian Dutch, and that's all I know. And it fit the word Pennsylvania in it, so that's how I remembered where Pennsylvania was. In terms of Tennessee and Kentucky, they're both, in my head, long states. I don't know how I remembered that they're long states or why I think that they're long states, but I do. Kentucky, I think fairly famously, looks the most like a chicken strip. So that's why I got that. And then Tennessee, I don't know why I remember Tennessee, but for some reason, Tennessee sticks in my mind very easily. Louisiana took me a while to remember where it was, but once I did, I now can't forget it because I think Louisiana is the only state that begins with an L, she says, not sure of herself. So again, it stands out as a weird looking state and a state that begins with an L. Easy. Next to Louisiana, we have Mags. Now I remember Mags because they're like a gun. They're just above Florida, which looks like a gun. They're the southern states. I think southern states are very into their gun. So I knew it was Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and then right? South Carolina. There we go. Panicking. I've already forgotten. I knew Louisiana. Then we've got Arkansas, Oklahoma, also shaped kind of like a gun, maybe more like a kind of like meat chopper, I guess, maybe. New Mexico, I remember as it would be on the the Mexican border. So it took me a little while to get the difference between New Mexico and Arizona, but I just started to remember the shapes. Arizona, I only really worked out based on the fact that it's a hot place, or assuming it's a hot place. So I just kept putting it low. Same in Nevada. I knew Nevada was a desert, so I just had to basically learn these three together 51 attempts. It's not getting much better, but it's doing better. So I got New Mexico, Arizona, hot and low, Nevada, next to California. That's all I could do. Utah, I got it because every single time I looked at that shape, I was like, what on earth is that one? So that's how I got it. Was Utah. Montana, I don't know if I've mentioned it yet. I got because of Hannah Montana. I got really confused because I think that's filmed in California, the show, and then she's obviously from the South of America, so I was just so confused why Montana is so north, and that's why I remember where it was, because I was like, why is it that north? Then below that, Wyoming, which feeds into why is Montana so north when everything about Hannah Montana is south. It really, really confused me. Nebraska, really similar. I remember it just by being below South Dakota. S and N's are really similar. Then we also have Colorado, which took me ages, and I just remembered it as being collared. It's kind of 56 attempts. So close though. Surrounded by loads of different states. So that's how, the only way I can remember it, even though loads of states are surrounded by other states, the only way I can remember Colorado was thinking of it as being collared by lots of other states. Trying to remember if I've forgotten to mention any states. Idaho is because I put my, think of someone putting their hand up and saying that they're the hoe. Oregon, because it sounds a bit like Washington. Nevada, Missouri, because Missouri. I think I've mentioned all the states, so there you go. That's how I worked it out. In total, this took me about 45 minutes, and I sped it up 3 times to get it to fit into an allowable YouTube length. Yeah, and so that's my first attempt in getting them all correct, and then I just do it again just to make sure it wasn't just like a fluke, because obviously it does depend. Sometimes if one state where you kind of umming and ahhing, so for instance Minnesota and Wisconsin, if one comes up first, it's slightly easier, or you just guess it correctly first. But yeah, I'm super proud of myself. 45 minutes isn't terrible for a Brit to guess it or to work it all out. I just have to keep practicing just so I can remember, because it is always fun to know the basics of American geography. It comes up like surprisingly often, because obviously, you know, there'll be some, no offense, some sort of mass shooting or something, and people will be like, where is that? And you can be like, oh yeah, it's right next to this one or whatever. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Bye.